Hello and welcome to Written Words. And the summer, such as it is here in Britain, is in full swing, and we are well and truly in the middle of the literary festival season. I'm going to be at a few of those festivals over the coming weeks and months, and I've prepared a little quiz sheet to have with me on my stall. I've got a character quiz on one side of the sheet, testing your knowledge of characters from classic literature and whether you know which books which characters come from. And on the other side of the sheet is a challenge. Can you write like Dickens? A list of the events that I'm going to be at is on my blog at writtenwords.uk. If you're not able to go to any of those events, however, don't worry, because a copy of the sheet is also available on my blog at writtenwords.uk/blog. So this video is to go with the Can You Write Like Dickens challenge. Charles Dickens was an expert crafter of prose. He was a very gifted wordsmith and he knew how to use the English language well. Much of his writing was serialised, meaning it appeared chapter by chapter in newspapers, periodicals or journals, so people would read one chapter at a time and then they'd have to wait for the next issue of whatever the periodical was before they could find out what happened next in the story. It's a little bit like a modern day soap opera where you watch one episode and then you have to wait until the next episode is aired before you find out what happens in the story next. So if you're writing for a format like that, it's really important to keep your readers engaged. You have to keep them hanging at the end of an episode or a chapter so that they want to come back for the next one. Dickens was also known for giving public readings of his work. He would perform his work aloud in theatres. And as a result, he developed a style of writing that lends itself very well to being read aloud. So let's have a look at a passage from Bleak House, which is considered by many people to be one of his best novels, if not the best. The passage comes from near the beginning of the novel. It's setting the scene, and as with much of Dickens' work, it's setting the scene in London. So let's take a look at how Dickens describes London in this passage. Fog everywhere. Fog up the river where it flows among green aits and meadows. Fog down the river where it rolls defiled among the tiers of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog on the Essex marshes, fog on the Kentish heights, fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats, fog in the eyes and throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners wheezing by the firesides of their wards, fog in the stem and bowl of the afternoon pipe of the wrathful skipper down in his close cabin, fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivering little prentice boy on deck, chance people on the bridges peeping over the parapets into a nether sky of fog, with fog all round them, as if they were up in a balloon and hanging in the misty clouds. Gas looming through the fog in divers places in the streets, much as the sun may from the spongy fields be seen to loom by husbandman and ploughboy. Most of the shops lighted 2 hours before their time, as the gas seems to know, for it has a haggard and unwilling look. The raw afternoon is rawest, and the dense fog is densest, and the muddy streets are muddiest, near that leaden-headed old obstruction, appropriate ornament for the threshold of a leaden-headed old corporation, Temple Bar. And hard by Temple Bar, in Lincoln's Inn Hall, at the very heart of the fog, sits the Lord High Chancellor in his High Court of Chancery. Never can there come fog too thick, never can there come mud and mire too deep to assort with the groping and floundering condition which this High Court of Chancery, most pestilent of hoary sinners, holds this day in the sight of heaven and earth. One of the most striking things on reading this passage for the first time is the large number of times that Dickens repeats the word fog. If you've ever done any writing courses, or thinking back to your days at school when teachers are teaching you how to do creative writing, one of the things that we're often told is to avoid repetition. Try not to use the same word more than once in the same paragraph. But Dickens does it here, and he does it a lot. He uses fog many, many times in this short extract. Fog everywhere, fog up the river, fog down the river, fog on the Essex Marches, fog on the Kentish Heights. He uses fog a lot of times. So why does he do that? He does it for emphasis. Fog is important in this story, so he wants you to understand that. He wants to emphasise that fog matters in this story. He wants to emphasise that fog is everywhere, not just everywhere in London, but everywhere in this passage. Fog matters. Fog is significant in this story. So he repeats it again and again to emphasise that fact. Another thing that's very striking about this particular extract is, particularly in the first two paragraphs, there are a lot of incomplete sentences. Once again, going back to writing courses or back to the school classroom, we are told write in full sentences. In order for a sentence to be a full sentence, it needs a minimum of a subject and a verb. A subject is the person or thing doing the action, and the verb is the action. But there are many, many incomplete sentences in these first two paragraphs that do not contain verbs. The first sentence says, fog everywhere. There is no verb in there. We have a subject, it's the fog, but there is no verb. We're not told what the fog is doing. The next one says, fog up the river. That's not complete. There's a missing verb in there. So why is Dickens using incomplete sentences? I mentioned earlier that Dickens' work lends itself very well to being performed aloud. He performed it in theatres to audiences, and this passage sounds very much like stage directions. If we recall back to my previous couple of videos where we looked at Macbeth, Macbeth is a play, and so it includes stage directions. The beginning of Act 1, Scene 1 of Macbeth says, a desert place, thunder and lightning. Those are not complete sentences. A desert place is just a statement of what the place is like. Thunder and lightning just tells you the effects that are needed on stage at this particular moment in the play. Stage directions are instructions to the people setting up the theatre, setting the scene, getting everything ready so that they know what atmosphere to create. And here Dickens is creating an atmosphere. It's a very atmospheric passage. He's bringing the scene to life by including stage directions. If this were a play to be performed on a stage, the stage managers at this point would be thinking, we need a smoke machine because we have to have fog everywhere. Then moving on to the other two paragraphs, there's something quite interesting there as well, because Dickens does something that was fairly unusual at the time that he was writing, and that is it's written in the present tense. We're told that the raw afternoon is rawest. Is the present tense of the verb to be. And the muddy streets are muddiest. Are is the present tense. And we're told that the Lord High Chancellor sits. So that's the present tense. He's doing it now. So again, it's as if Dickens is describing the scene in front of us, as if it's a play. There is fog everywhere. The Lord High Chancellor is sitting in his High Court, as if an audience is watching a play that's about to unfold. If you read on through the book, his use of tenses is very interesting in this book because he alternates between passages in the present tense and passages in the past tense. Another device that Dickens is quite fond of using and is in this passage is personification. Personification is where you describe something as if it was alive, as if it was a person. So you're describing an inanimate object, but as if it was capable of thinking and feeling and doing things like people. He personifies the fog. He says the fog creeps and it lies out on the yard and it hovers and droops, but also it cruelly pinches the toes and fingers of the little apprentice. So by giving it that cruel intent, he is personifying the fog. Then we're told that the gas seems to know what's going on. Gas doesn't know things. Gas isn't capable of knowing things, but Dickens describes it as if it does. And then at the end of this passage, he talks about the High Court of Chancery, which is a very key element in this story. And he describes it as the most pestilent of hoary sinners. So a court is a building, it's got people in it, but again, Dickens personifies the court itself. So this is a very atmospheric passage, but what is the mood that he's creating here? How is he describing London? The mood he's creating is not a very happy one. It's very dismal, it's very gloomy. And the presence of the fog everywhere obscures things. In this book, there is a lot of contrast between light and dark, between sunlight and shadow, and between obscurity and clarity. And the fog is obscurity. It's literally obscurity because it prevents you from seeing things, but it's also symbolic. Because this is a mystery story, and a mystery story needs obscurity. It needs you to not be able to see things straight away. It needs to leave you guessing. And so the fog brings a level of obscurity to the story. So that is an example of Dickens describing London. Much of his work is set in London, and many of his novels contain evocative descriptions of scenes in London. It's quite a miserable negative scene, and not all of the novel is miserable and negative. There is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of contrast. There are some scenes in places which are very positive and full of light. But for this challenge, have a go at writing a scene in the style of this extract. It could be positive or it could be negative, describing the typical weather in the place where you live and the effect that it has on the people and objects around it. How might the weather impact the prevailing mood in the surrounding area? If you've had a go at this exercise and you'd like to share your scene, feel free to put it in the comments below. I'll be very interested to read what you've come up with. So once again, if you would like a copy of this sheet with the extract and the questions and also the character quiz on the back, it is available on my blog at writtenwords.uk. My next video will be going back to our GCSE texts, and I'm going to be looking at An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley. So for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and if you're able, at any of the events over the summer. And in the meantime, happy reading and happy writing.